Welcome to the Lineman Life podcast. It is the end of the NFL regular season, and obviously, I am your observant lineman, Uche Nwaneri. I'd like to thank everyone for joining in on the podcast. We got a nice show for you here today. We are going to be talking about the obvious craziness that was Week 17. A lot of crazy finishes. Few surprises and a lot to really gather from the finishes of certain teams who become big disappointments based on what was expected of them this season. But we'll also talk about the bracket that we're all going to be keeping an eye on here in the NFL. The wild card weekend is coming up. It is almost upon us. On Sunday, a week from today, we will be witnessing a few surprise teams playing in the wild card matchups. But first, let's talk about some of the endings of Sunday's games. Probably a big surprise for a lot of people. A lot of people did not expect to see that the New England Patriots would be out-dueled by the Miami Dolphins in Week 17. Those Miami Dolphins, those Miami boys, got it done going into Foxborough and getting the win against the New England Patriots. They beat the Patriots in Foxborough, and it makes Ryan Fitzpatrick, Fitzmagic, as we like to call him. He is the only quarterback who has beaten the New England Patriots in New England on each team that he has been on. That, to me, is something that definitely deserves commendation. Of course, they go in and beat the Patriots 27-24 in Foxborough. Fitzpatrick, 28 for 41, 320 yards and a touchdown. And again, leaves people wondering what is going on with the New England offense. These guys have struggled. A very uncharacteristic pick six thrown by Tom Brady early in the game really was a weird thing to see. A weird thing to see that Tom Brady was unable to pull it out in a game that really had a lot on the line for the Patriots seeding-wise. But on the other end of that, it ended up being just what the doctor ordered for the Kansas City Chiefs, who had to go and win their game against the Los Angeles Chargers and have New England lose in order to secure that first round bye. They were able to do that, beating the Chargers 31-21. And, look, we all know what kind of franchise the Patriots are. We all understand the pedigree that can be associated with the greatness of the New England Patriots, but wow, did they not lay a huge egg in their loss to the Miami Dolphins? That was an opportunity for them to get that first round bye, to get an opportunity to get everybody healed up a little bit and get ready for that divisional matchup, which, is pretty much par for the course for New England as far as most people are concerned. You expect to see them playing starting in the second week of the playoffs, and we're going to see them in the wild card, and they have not boded well as a wild card team. New England has no Super Bowl appearances, no AFC title appearances, and no Super Bowl wins, obviously, when they are not sitting at the top of the seeding. And history is not on their side right now in terms of their ability to push for a Super Bowl this year, but we'll see what happens. I mean, never bet against Tom, right? But let's go to, I got a couple of questions out of Reddit that I'm going to start off, and I'm absolutely positive that first question is going to be regarding the situation with the wild card game for the Patriots. So with that being said, our first question off of Reddit comes from Steel Soldier 77. What do you think? Who do you think will win the matchup between Tennessee and Baltimore in 2 weeks? That's a brave question to ask. That's going with the assumption that Tennessee is going to be grabbing that win in Foxborough against the Patriots in the wild card weekend. And to answer it, I'll just say this. I think that in order to make a run for the Super Bowl, in order to have a legitimate shot at making a run for the Super Bowl, your team has to be an all-around balanced team. And I think right now, when you look at the situation with Tennessee going into Foxborough, I think Tennessee right now, and this is coming from a Jaguar player, a guy who looks at the Titans and the Colts and the Texans as rivals, and you never really want to see your rivals do better than you. But I can honestly say right here, right now, that in my opinion, New England will not beat the Tennessee Titans in their wild card matchup, and for a few reasons. I think that we witnessed a few chinks in the armor of that Patriots defense against Miami. Fitzmagic looked pretty damn good out there. The guy was throwing the ball all over the place. The Miami receivers were making great grabs out of the air. Their running game was solid, and their defense played a pretty darn good game. Solid all-around effort from the Miami Dolphins, a team that was sitting at 4-11 before that game, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they were sitting at 4-11 before that game, and really with nothing to play for other than to be the spoilers. But I really think that the head coach out there in Miami, who was also an assistant in New England for 15 years, this guy had that team galvanized and ready to play. And at the end of the day, they showed us some of the deficiencies in that New England secondary, maybe not as good as we thought they were. But with that being said, and with the New England offense really not having that air attack that we're used to seeing, that efficiency that we're used to seeing on offense, I really feel like at the end of the day, Tennessee is going to come in there with the game plan that we all know is going to start with running the ball. They've been that kind of team historically. They're going to come with that smash mouth football. It's going to be a lot of runs in between the centers. They're going to make sure that they get Derrick Henry as many carries as they can. He now holds the rushing title, which I'm sure that many people are aware of at this point. The guy played lights out throughout the course of the season and finished off his season yesterday against the Texans with 32 carries for 211 yards and 3 touchdowns. This guy is a force to be reckoned with. I don't think that the Patriots are going to have an answer for that kind of running attack with a balanced passing attack coming from Tannehill. You're going to be looking at a team that is going to probably outclass New England in most departments, most parts of the game on offense, defense, and special teams in the wild card game. So I agree with this prediction by our friend Steel Soldier 77. And I love that he has that 77 at the end of his name, because that is my jersey number. That is my personal number, 77. I think that Tennessee will be playing against Baltimore in 2 weeks, barring some kind of unforeseen circumstances. Tennessee should be able to go into New England and get the job done. So thank you for that question there, Steel Soldier 77. But let's talk a little bit about some of the disappointments of this season so far. And we'll get back to the playoff talk here in a moment, but I do want to talk a little bit about what is going on with a lot of the head coaching vacancies that we may be seeing coming here soon in the NFL. As most of you know, Freddie Kitchens was fired by the Cleveland Browns. That's not much of a surprise there. This is a team that is probably top down, one of the top 5 most talented squads in the NFL. Obviously, this season was a utter disappointment. And there's really not much more that can be said about that. These guys in Cleveland were unable to consistently have any kind of rhythm as a team. You're not really sure where the leadership lays with that team. I know that we look at Baker Mayfield and we say, hey, this guy should be the the leader of the squad after having a promising rookie campaign. He had 3,700 yards passing, 27 touchdowns, 14 interceptions. But if you look a little bit deeper into those statistics, you'll find that a lot of the yardage and a lot of the touchdowns came in what many would consider garbage time. So a little bit of a misleading stat there. But the Browns, by all intents and purposes, should have been getting ready for their playoff run this season with the kind of talent that roster had. Did not happen, and right now we are looking at what appears to be an organization in a bit of flux. These guys are looking for the right formula, and it's definitely going to be a situation where we see these guys looking to kind of retool slightly for next year. But again, the Cleveland Browns are a show me team, just like the Jacksonville Jaguars were when I was there. If you're not winning, then nobody believes that you will win. So they are going to have a lot to prove coming into next season. But as for this year, it definitely has to be listed as a disappointment. And that's the way it is. That's the funny thing about the NFL is that you can have as much talent as you want on any roster, but at the end of the day, there has to be chemistry. There has to be a certain level of gelling between phases on the team, which are offense, special teams, and defense. There has to be a great chemistry with the coaches. There has to be a buy-in to the culture. And when you have all those things, then you now have what is needed to at least go out and be competitive from week to week. But from there, you're going to also need guys to make plays. You're going to need your playmakers to stand up. You're going to need your role players to play their roles. And we didn't see much of that at all with the Cleveland Browns. So I guess at the end of the day, if you're really looking at the intangibles that are needed before you step out on the field, the Cleveland Browns didn't really have that from the start. So why are we really surprised that they had such a disappointing season? I really just believe that before you can even step on the field, you need those kind of things to be going in the right, to be moving the right way. So they didn't have that, and obviously, at the end of the day, their season was not one that could be considered in any way, shape, or form a success. Next up, and I know a lot of y'all are waiting on this one. Next up, we have the Dallas Cowboys. I mean, let's think about this for a second. Dallas Cowboys have not been to a Super Bowl, have not won a Super Bowl or been to the Super Bowl since 1995. So we're looking at about a 24-year hiatus between Super Bowl appearances. These guys have not been able to even sniff the conference championship round in the playoffs. The Dallas Cowboys are what I would consider an all-around mediocre franchise, an all-around mediocre team with an inflated ego and an inflated perception of themselves that, at the end of the day, is anybody here really surprised that the Cowboys, once again, when the chips are down, once again, when everything is directly in front of them, when they have the chance to control their own destiny, the Cowboys have once again proven that they are not America's team. They have once again proven that they are not the team that everyone thinks they are. They aren't who we thought they were. So don't crown them. These guys have shown nothing more than a mediocre performance. Regardless of their seasonal record, these guys have either floundered out in the playoffs in the first or second round, or they just haven't made the playoffs at all. And this year is no different. This year they finished with an 8-8 record with a quarterback who has, career passing numbers, 4,500, almost 4,600 yards passing for Dak Prescott, 26 touchdowns, and Ezekiel Elliott, 1,200 yards rushing. They paid him a lot of money, and the guy, I can't blame him for I can't add him to the blame in terms of why they were unsuccessful, because after they paid this guy the amount of money they gave him, they didn't give him the ball. And every time this guy touched the ball, he ate, and he ate well. And the Cowboys neglected one of the premier running backs in the NFL. They neglected him through the course of the season. And obviously, when you don't have a running game that can run with the best of them to complement your passing attack, you just don't have the kind of offense that you think you do. But let's take a deeper look into these Cowboys for a second. It's funny to me. The Cowboys are, at least in this season, have proven that, they can beat bums. And that's pretty much about it. They can beat the teams that they should beat. They can beat the teams with the losing records. They can beat the teams that are in complete disarray. But when you put them against any team of noteworthiness, they don't win. And this season is an absolute confirmation of that. You look at their record, and they went up against a number of teams that, obviously, they go up against teams that have no winning record, and they win. Like, let's say, the Redskins, the Giants, the Dolphins, the Lions, at the time, the Rams. But you look at the teams with the winning records that they have to go against, the teams that are actually playing with some consistency, and you have them against the Vikings, loss, Patriots, loss, Bills, loss, Bears, loss, Eagles, loss. This isn't a team, Saints, loss, Packers, loss, Jets, loss. I mean, this is not a team that is a contender by any stretch of the imagination, based on their ability to play against and beat teams that have good records or are playing 500 or better football. They just don't have it. They don't have it. And I think that it would behoove anybody who is a Cowboys fan to take a step back for a second and just think about what your team really has accomplished over the last 15 plus years. What steps can you say the franchise has really taken forward over the last 15 plus years? I was in Dallas for a little bit in my last season in the NFL, and it was quite mind-boggling to me, the perception that this franchise has of itself. When I walked into that locker room and saw the large poster board that they have right presentable to you when you walk in the locker room, it says it is a privilege, not a right, to play for the Dallas Cowboys. And I laughed. I laughed when I saw that, because in my head, I'm thinking to myself, what? I mean, first off, yes, we understand it's a privilege to play in this NFL. That is a privilege for sure. But the Dallas Cowboys, you guys are the most overhyped franchise in the NFL every single season. And this is just one more sign of arrogance as a franchise. Arrogance that now, for the umpteenth year in a row, has only proven to be the downfall of this team each and every year. And I think a lot of that has to do with Jerry Jones. I think Jerry Jones is a big part of the disappointment in Dallas. He is, for lack of a better word, he's a kind of a cancer to this franchise, in my opinion. And I think that at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, you have a franchise here that, unless they are able to find a way to get Jerry Jones's grip from around the neck of the people who choose personnel, the people who are in charge of scouting and being able to make decisions in drafting players and signing free agents, until you can loosen his grip, get his hand off of that, then this franchise is not going to see any better results. I just don't see it happening. And for all intents and purposes, the Cowboys should not be hailed or hyped as a team that is a Super Bowl contender in any way, shape, or form for the foreseeable future until they can prove that they can beat good teams on a consistent basis. I just think that's simple as that. I think it's simple as that. So let's go on to our next disappointment of the year. And I'm going to have to say, in all honesty, based on what we saw early in the season and how things ended up, you got to look at the Los Angeles Rams. Los Angeles Rams, big disappointment based on what they were able to accomplish early on in the season, and obviously based on their Super Bowl appearance last year. I mean, was it a Super Bowl hangover? I think not. I think that you can talk about a Super Bowl hangover when you win the Super Bowl. Those are the kind of situations where you could talk about a hangover. But we have the 9-7 Rams, who, while finishing with a plus 500 record, still failed to make the playoffs out of the NFC. And I think a lot of that has to do with their inability to run the football. They're ranked 24th in rushing offense, with a front line that's listed 17th in run blocking, with a 4.3 yards per carry running yardage amount for their running backs. And Todd Gurley, something's going on with that guy. I think that there may be some friction between him and either a position coach or the franchise itself. The guy just did not look the same this year, in my opinion. I'm not sure that at the end of the day, he's happy in Los Angeles with the Rams. And if that's the case, then, maybe they should look into dealing him. But, these guys had a rough patch in the middle of the season, kind of sank their ship. But, they have kind of backed themselves into a corner here. They signed some guys. They got some guys on the trade. They gave away a lot of draft picks to grab Jalen Ramsey from the Jaguars. So it's going to be a tough situation for them to try and retool things coming into next season. But, not the worst disappointment, I would say, but definitely something that we mostly did not expect from the Los Angeles Rams. I would have expected at least for them to be a wild card team at the end of the season, and worst case scenario. Best case scenario, winning their division and being a high seed, maybe a top 3 to top 5 seed. But definitely not something that I think most people would view as a good season for them. Even with the above 500 record, these guys definitely did not make things happen in a manner that most of us thought they would make things happen. But still at the end of the day, they still have the pieces in place to become to become a contender next season. But right now, just not the best of places for them to be in. A large bit of disappointment, I'm sure, for them as well. But the Los Angeles Rams unable to make the playoffs this year, and that is quite unfortunate in and of itself. I would also go as far as to say, the Los Angeles Chargers, another team that, generally puts together pretty solid seasons. They have had, just kind of a falling from grace over the past few years. And with a 5-11 record this year, that was about as bad as any of us would have even dreamed that a Phillip Rivers-led Chargers squad would perform. This was the first time under Anthony Lynn that they finished below 500. And man, a lot of people are talking about this may be the end of the era for Phillip Rivers. A lot of people don't expect him to be back with the team next year. I'm going to hold out, reserve my judgment on that, just simply because you got to give that guy some respect in the things that he's been able to do in San Diego. Yeah, he hasn't been able to make the big game. Yeah, people may put him in the same category as they put Dan Marino. But at the end of the day, I think that this guy has been one of the all-time greats. I think he has been one of the all-time, most fierce competitors out there on the field. I remember there was a time in my career when I was looking at an opportunity to go into free agency, and this was before I signed my second contract with the Jaguars. this was a team that was at the top of the list for me to try and go to. I wanted to go to either San Diego or Pittsburgh when they were the San Diego Chargers. I wanted to either go to San Diego or I wanted to go to Pittsburgh and play for the Steelers. Those were the two teams that were at the top of my list for free agency. Unfortunately, we had a little thing called the NFL lockout that was hanging over our heads. So the Jaguars decided to go ahead and lock me down before we even got to that point, and the rest was history. But definitely do me a favor, guys, smash that like button. Make sure you smash that like button down on the bottom of the screen there. That YouTube algorithm is a beast. But as long as I have you guys smashing the like button, then we should be seeing more and more of my videos popping up in the recommended section. But let's continue on here. Let's talk a little bit about the head coaching situations that are going to be they're going to be a prevalent part of the offseason storyline. Even as we're heading into the playoffs here, you're already hearing some of the news headlines coming out of places like New York, where New York has already fired their head coach, Shermer. Let's see, what's this guy's first name? They fire Pat Shermer. The Giants fire Pat Shermer after 2 seasons. His record at 2 seasons was 9-23. Now, look, you're in New York. You are playing for you are coaching the New York Giants. You cannot go into New York and have a team after 2 seasons be 9-23. That's never going to bode well for your career there. These guys are, regardless of what anyone thinks about the Giants, this is a top-tier organization in the NFL, and they are not one to sit idly by and allow mediocrity and bad play to hang around long in their organization. Now, I'm going to do a little screen share from here. I see an article from Bleacher Report that I'm going to share with you guys. I think that we can go through this and kind of talk about that Giants, that situation with the Giants head coaching position. Right, let's see here. All right, so it says here, Pat Shermer fired by Giants, finished with 9-23 record after 2 seasons. And it says, and this is a statement from team president John Mara, Chairman Steve Tisch and I have had many extensive discussions about the state of the Giants. This morning, we made the very difficult decision that it would be in the best interest of the franchise that we relieve Pat of his duties. The last 3 seasons have been extremely disappointing for the organization and our fans. Pat has been a successful and highly respected coach for 21 years, and he is not solely responsible for our record. But we came to the conclusion it is best to have a fresh start with the coaching staff. We very much appreciate how much Pat has done for this franchise. He is a man of character and integrity, and the team has conducted itself with pride and professionalism. And, at the end of the day, and it continues on here, as owners, we take full responsibility for our recent poor record. It is our goal to consistently deliver high-quality football, and we will do everything in our power to see that there is a rapid and substantial turnaround. So I think, taking a look at this, and knowing this situation here, the Giants, again, like I said, this is a top level franchise that has seen, days of Super Bowl championships, with Tom Coughlin at the helm. And it's unfortunate that they have fallen to such a low. Obviously, Eli Manning not being the same quarterback he was back in those years, winning Super Bowls. Obviously, not with that defense just taking large hits and not being able to kind of galvanize themselves and return to form with that elite pass rush that they used to have. And a head coach that, by all intents and purposes, just wasn't the kind of guy who was going to lead this franchise back to relevancy. And for me, this situation with him kind of seems similar to the one that we had with Mike Mularkey at the head coach for us in Jacksonville back in 2011, 2012. Just a guy who just really didn't fit. Just a guy who just really was not, didn't have a great connection with the players, didn't have a great connection with the fan base, and just was unable to really get the most out of the team that he had. Now, again, I'm not going to say that these guys necessarily had the most talented squad or had a squad that was good enough to get them in a position to be a contender, but definitely was not the kind of football that we expect to see from the New York Giants. And obviously, they have studs like Saquon Barkley. That guy's going to be he's already an amazing running back, but he's going to be one of the era when it's all said and done, one of the best in the era once it's all said and done. But still, at the end of the day, you really got to take a look at what's going on with the staff when you have seasons that play out like this. The staff is usually the first thing that gets a look, along with the head coach. And then from there, you go to the GM and you try and turn things around there. But, for me personally, I've always felt like if you get rid of the head coach, you might as well get rid of the GM as well, because those guys work hand in hand. And a lot of times when you have seasons that don't play out the way that you would have hoped, it's because there is a divide or a rift between the head coach and the general manager. And those kind of issues can really trickle down into the locker room. And I'm not saying that was necessarily the case here with the Giants, but it just was not in any way, shape, or form the kind of performance that you want to see from a franchise that has been recently a very strong performer in the NFL. And they're always looking to keep pace with teams like the Cowboys and Cowboys and the Eagles. So definitely, I think the right move for the Giants, and we'll see what they do to fill that void in the coming weeks. But let's take another look here at another question coming in from our Reddit users, and I will grab that question here. Give me 1 second. Let's see. Let's see here. We have a lot of talk about the Titans here in Reddit. I see a lot of guys talking about this Titans Patriots matchup. And like I said before, that's going to be a good matchup. It's definitely going to be a good matchup. Titans, I think, are going to be the ones to come out with it. But, what else do we got here in terms of the playoff picture? Because there are more than just one game with the Patriots and the Titans going on, guys. So submit those questions. I see a lot of talk going on here. See a couple of disappointed Cowboys fans in the Reddit Reddit thread. But says here, Cowboys fan, huge expectations and ultimately a letdown. And that is obviously the truth. Couldn't be more truer. Let's see here. Oh, we got somebody here talking about Saints versus Vikings. Who wins? And let me pull this down here for a second. We have the seedings here on the background of my StreamYard stream. But as you guys can see there was the bracket. Who's going to win it, Saints or Vikings? I think this is actually one of the more intriguing matchups for the wild card weekend going into the playoffs, and that's coming from our guy Odin. Saints versus Vikings. Who wins? Well, I got to be honest with you. I'm pulling for the Saints because of Drew Brees, Purdue alumni, a guy who has, obviously one of the greatest of all times. I mean, just unbelievable in terms of his skill, leadership, accountability. Doesn't get much better than Drew Brees when you're talking about the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And such a snub that he wasn't on that top 100 list with the quarterbacks. I thought that was an absolute travesty. But back to the game, I think, honestly, this is a hard one to call, but I'm going to give it to the Saints because at the end of the day, when you got to go into that Superdome and you got to play against those Saints amongst those rabid fans, that is one of the hardest jobs in the league. I think that definitely you're going to be looking at a game that is going to be a hard-fought game, as it always is between these two teams. I'm sure we all remember what happened to the Saints a few years back in the playoffs. I'm sure they're going to be looking to get some get back for that. But definitely it's going to be a tough one. But I do see that the Saints will come out with the win in that game. That's what I'm predicting. I'm predicting that they'll be the team to bring it home. And while it won't be the easiest win, it may not even be a pretty win, it will be a win nonetheless. And Drew Brees will continue on his quest to secure another Super Bowl victory. But definitely it's going to be a great game. It's really got some interesting matchups in this playoff scenarios that are going on here, or these playoff matchups that are going on here. But that is one that I think is going to be another tough fought game. Same as I think the game with the Titans and the Patriots will be. And then also you got Buffalo and Houston. You got Seattle and Philly. These are some tough games to call. Let's be honest. These are going to be some tough games to call. Buffalo, Houston. Buffalo finished on a little bit of a whimper here during the regular season, but I still believe that they have what it takes to get out of the first round. Houston also coming off that loss to Tennessee, but at the same time, I got to believe that with the kind of offense they have, the kind of players they have, it's going to be a heck of a matchup. I mean, at the end of the day, you got Deshaun Watson, you got DeAndre Hopkins. These guys are going to be out there putting on a show. And, it's going to be hard to go into Houston and get that win. Houston Stadium isn't the hardest to play in noise-wise. I think a lot of the noise in their stadium tends to go upwards instead of down towards the field. But that they still have, it's still a pretty good energy in that stadium when you're playing in Houston. Played there a number of times, obviously, but definitely this will be another one of those, tough matchups. It's a tough one to call. It's a tough one to call for sure. You look at Josh Allen and what he's doing with with Buffalo. The guy's a tough guy. He's a tough player. He plays, from beginning to end. And the guy, had some audio feeding in there from some autoplay mess on ESPN. But yeah, you look at Josh Allen, you look at what he's done at the quarterback position. He's thrown for over 3,000 yards, 20 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. The guy has had a good season. He's had a very good season. But one thing that is for certain when dealing with the Buffalo Bills is that if you can get pressure on their quarterback, it's going to be a long day for them. I mean, when you saw how they played against New England in both games, pressure on the quarterback pretty much sunk their ship. Even in Buffalo, playing against the Patriots in that second matchup, these guys just were not able to really they just weren't able to really put together much of an offensive effort throughout most of that game because they just could not get Josh Allen to the end of his drops without having him, having to run for his life. But definitely hoping that he's able to have a better showing in this first playoff game for him. I think that at the end of the day, Houston does win that one, but it's going to be a good game nonetheless. Also, you got Seattle, Philly, and that one right there, that's a tough one. It's a tough one because when when you look at the fact that Seattle is 11-5, and they're going to have to go to Philly to play against the Eagles that are 9-7, coming out of that NFC East, which was probably, for them being the playoff team to come out of that division, that's probably the weakest division in football, top to bottom. Really is not something that is ideal for those Seahawks to have to go into Philly, because that is a much harder game to play. And, when the playoffs start, it is a brand new season of football. This is a totally different scenario than what you have in the regular season. This is everybody starting at 0-0. Nobody has anything really in terms of an advantage from a record standpoint, because the records reset. The mind states reset. You don't approach the playoffs in the same manner that you approach the regular season. It's a different speed. It's a different level of football. And really, that's probably one of the hardest places to play outside of Seattle. If you have to go somewhere for a playoff game, you don't want to go to Seattle, you don't want to go to Philly, and you don't want to go to New England, and you don't want to go to New Orleans. Those are probably the most difficult places to play in a playoff game, along with other places like Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's not in this year, but if they were, I would definitely be mentioning them. We'll talk a little bit about that later. I really think that the job that Mike Tomlin's done in Pittsburgh should earn him Coach of the Year honors in the NFL, because, for a team that had every single reason to tank it, this guy showed why there has only been 3 head coaches in the history of the Pittsburgh Steelers. And that is something that has to be commended at the highest levels, because there's not many coaches that could have still put together a team that is a 500 team based on the number of injuries and the number of offseason losses that they had in terms of players on the roster. Let's go back, and I know we're hopping around a little bit here, but let's go back and talk a little bit more about this coaching situation. The Jaguars are also another team that we're waiting to hear from in regards to their coaching situation. As everybody knows, Tom Coughlin was fired by the Jacksonville Jaguars a few weeks back, and that really was the beginning of the cleansing of this Jaguars front office, which has proven to be unable to consistently field a team that can play at a high level, that can play up to expectations. And since 2017, obviously, they have not been anywhere near that level of play. And it is something that the owner, Shad Khan, is going to have to address immediately if he wants to be able to salvage the roster they have now. So the Jaguars are one team that we're waiting to hear from. But we already know the fate of one former head coach out of Carolina. Ron Rivera has been brought in as the next head coach for the Washington Redskins, with the Redskins also firing I think they're fired. Who was it? The president, their team president, or it wasn't the general manager, I don't think. Let me pull this up real quick. Let's see here. Take a little look, see here. See. I'm just looking. Bruce Allen. Yes, Bruce Allen. Yeah, Bruce Allen officially fired. The president of football operations let go. Bruce Allen has been one of those guys who has shown every way that there is to destroy an NFL franchise. This guy has done probably one of the worst jobs in recent memory of any front office management in the NFL. And the Redskins released a statement. Dan Snyder released a statement saying, as this season concludes, Bruce Allen has been relieved of his duties as president of the Washington Redskins and is no longer with the organization. Like our passionate fan base, I recognize we have not lived up to the high standards set by great Redskins teams, coaches, and players who have come before us. As we reevaluate our team leadership, culture, and process for winning football games, I'm excited for the opportunities that lie ahead to renew our singular focus and purpose of bringing championship football back to Washington, D.C. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll believe it when I see it. These Redskins have been the epitome of awful in the last recent few years. Uh, and I mean, look, I know a couple of guys that played there. I'm good friends with Josh Norman. We text here and there, back and forth. But at the end of the day, when a franchise is managed as badly as this franchise has been managed, it's going to take a lot to get them even back up to a level of mediocrity. I mean, these guys have been underwater for so long. It's hard to tell if there's anything left to revive this franchise for the foreseeable future. But you never say never. But at the same time, I will believe it when I see it coming out of Washington, D.C. Not so sure that there is a ton that can be done for this franchise at this point without blowing up the entire roster and just basically starting with the foundation and from the ground up. But we'll see how everything plays out for them in the coming future. But right now, for me, I look at that and I say, good luck. Let's go and let's check these Reddit posts one more time here. We're going to take a quick 1 or 2 minute break. Let me figure out which one of these questions I want to put up to the podcast next. So give me 1 second here, folks, and we will be right back with the next Reddit question. All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back, Lineman Life podcast. And I got a question here coming from Lieutenant Kick Butt off Reddit. Lieutenant Kick Butt, thanks very much for the question. At the end of the NFC playoffs, which team do you think is going to be hurting most over Seattle coming up a half a yard short? Seattle, Green Bay, or New Orleans? Well, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, which I'm sure that's probably nobody in this in the podcast, but yesterday in the return of beast mode, Seattle Seahawks taking on the 49ers. The end of that game came literally down to an inch when the Seahawks were stopped at the inch yard line, keeping them out of the end zone and sealing that top seed placement for the San Francisco 49ers. Let's take a look at this play. I think that it's worth taking a look at here. As soon as this thing, let's see. It's worth taking a look at this here. Let me share this with you guys. This was one heck of a game. If you didn't know, the 49ers and the Seahawks, excellent game by these guys. But this is the play here. And Hollister was unable to get the ball across the plane. All he had to do was break the plane. But look, guys, that is one heck of an effort by both sides on defense and offense. And, this is really why we call football a game of inches. This is a game where at any given moment, something like this can be the deciding factor in a game. Something like this can be the difference between that a high seeding and then the Seattle Seahawks having to go to Philly to play against the Philadelphia Eagles that they have 3-game lead over in the division, but lost lose the home playoff game because of the Philadelphia Eagles winning their division with that 9-7 record. But definitely was a classic, in terms of how this game was played, and very unfortunate for the Seahawks, but at the same time, heck of an effort by the 49ers to get it done. I actually picked the Seahawks to win this game because playing in Seattle is half the battle. And, going in there and with this kind of rivalry that these two teams have had, but also with the kind of run that the Seahawks can make when they are playing at home, I really did not see that. I didn't see the 49ers coming out of this one with that top seeding. I just didn't see it. But these guys managed to pull it off, so kudos to them. Jimmy G out there still doing his thing. The guy's been looking better and better each and every week. Can't hate on that. But at the end of the day, I think that Seattle definitely loses the most in terms of their seeding being completely shot with this loss. And this is a team that still, has 11 wins. But like I said, when you win the division, you get the home playoff game. That's the rule. And these guys were not able to, secure their seating at home. They had a setup for them. They were at home last game, crowd behind you, return of beast mode. Return of beast mode by itself gave this team such a boost in morale. To have a guy like Marshawn Lynch back in the lineup, unfinished business, situation where a guy in his last appearance in Seattle, probably one of the most infuriating sequence of events for the Seattle Seahawks in their history, to have the ball at the 1-yard line and not be able to get the ball not be able to get an opportunity to send your team to a Super Bowl championship. I know that left quite a bitter taste in Marshawn Lynch's mouth. And obviously we know how the rest of that played out. He would then go on to Oakland to finish up before he would retire. But in the past week, brought back with the Seahawks, and it was the return of beast mode, and the Skittles were flying, and the fans were going wild. The first moment he touches the ball, you could just feel the energy. So there was that boost from beast mode coming back, but at the end of the day, this is what it boils down to right here. It boils down to a game of inches, literally a game of inches. So for the Seahawks, that totally changes the perception of their playoff run. Now they are fighting an uphill battle in the playoffs. From an 11-5 team, they are going to be playing an uphill battle going into Philly to take on the Eagles, and that in and of itself is just going to be a very, very hard game for these guys to go in and get the win. Now, obviously, you have the first round buys that go to San Fran, Green Bay, Baltimore, and Kansas City. And at the end of the day, I've got to say that out of those 4 teams that are getting the buys, I got to say that the most vulnerable team out there may very well be the Green Bay Packers. And I know that there may be some people out there who disagree with that, but you have to look at it from a certain perspective. These Green Bay Packers, with the first round bye, it breaks up some of that momentum that they've had to finish out the season. One thing that we've noticed through this season is that Aaron Rodgers has now been gifted with a bit more talent on the offensive side of the ball. Main talent being their running back Jones, I believe his last name is. Let me get it right here. Let me get it right. Let's see. Let me get it right. Aaron Jones. That's his name. Aaron Jones has been the MVP, I would say, for the Green Bay Packers throughout the course of this season. We all know what Aaron Rodgers brings to the table. We know the kind of quarterbacking greatness that he has. But I think what has really made the difference for this franchise this season has been the addition of Aaron Jones and his ability to be a playmaker both in the running game and in the passing game. The guy can catch the ball out of the backfield with the best of them. He runs well. This guy has been a mini kind of Christian McCaffrey for this Green Bay Packers team. The guy has he eclipsed the 1,000-yard mark in rushing, got 1,084 yards rushing, 4.6 yard average, which is huge. An efficient run in the NFL is an average of 4 yards, and this guy is 4.6. He's had 5 56-yard a long of 56 yards in the run game. Also 16 touchdowns, only 2 fumbles, 1 of them lost. This guy has been an all-around great player for the team. He is third on the team in receiving yards with 474 receiving yards. He has 3 touchdowns out of the backfield, but he's been such a playmaker for them coming out of the backfield. And for a guy who's been on the team already for a few years, he's had a breakout season that has really shown him to be one of the up-and-coming superstars in the NFL. So Green Bay Packers, to me, are probably going to be the team that's hurt most by having this bye. I really think that these guys needed to keep playing. They just needed to keep playing and keep that momentum going. Sometimes when you break up the momentum for a team, it can kind of put players in a little bit of a rusty zone with how they play coming off of that week off. We'll see. I think that it's something that you got to look out for with a team like Green Bay. But you look at the rest of the top seeds out of the AFC and the NFC. Baltimore, obviously, everybody knows that that's the team to beat. Kansas City, not too far behind, but at the same time, I wouldn't necessarily put them on the same level as the Ravens. I think that we could very well be looking at a Ravens Niners Super Bowl. That's where I'm leaning right now. But I think it's going to be one heck of a playoff season this year. I think it's going to be one that's going to be unpredictable for the most part, especially with these early wild card rounds. We'll see what happens though. But definitely looking forward to this year's playoffs. It's going to be a good one. I think it might be one of the all-time best playoff races that we'll see. Let's see here. Let's take another look. Here at the Reddit postings and see if we got another question here. Let me see. We have and so we got somebody here saying, somebody asking about the Titans, but what about the injury bowl in Philly? Bookie's saying it's a 50-50. Two of the most clutch QBs with barely any weapons can go all different ways. And hey, that is, like I said, that's not too far off from the truth. You have Philly and Seattle, like I said. Philly has had a ton of injuries. Philly is without any of their premier receivers. The Seattle Seahawks are without, any of their the typical running backs that they had. Now, obviously, we know about Marshawn Lynch. Don't have to go too much into that. But definitely, they have been dealing with a ton of injuries themselves. But again, I think this is going to be the playoffs is not necessarily the time when you're going to see a ton of points getting thrown on the board in terms of offensive production. You're going to see very precise, very hard-hitting, very, generally low to moderate scoring games. You're not going to really see a lot of the scoring pick up until late in the second half when it starts getting into crunch time. But I definitely think that, it's just a different beast when you get into the playoffs. My rookie year in Jacksonville, we went 2 rounds deep. We beat Pittsburgh in the first round, lost to New England in the second round. And both games were not particularly high scoring. Defenses are featured more heavily in the playoffs because play calling generally becomes slightly more conservative in the playoffs. This is a one and done scenario for all the teams that are going to be in there playing. So you don't want to try, you don't want to take too many risks or too many uncalculated risks. But definitely it's I don't see that the Philly Seattle game is going to play out too much differently than a lot of the other wild card games. I think the highest scoring you'll probably see would be 24, 28 points, probably on average around 21 points per game. But it's the playoffs is always a time where defenses, are supposed to step up and play ball, play their best ball of the year. So we'll see how that plays out. Guillermo, we got a question here. Who do you think is the best OT coming out of college, Wirfs, Thomas, or Willis from Alabama? Well, I'll tell you one thing, man. I don't necessarily keep up so much with what's going on with individual players in college football, but I'll tell you one thing. Generally, linemen coming straight out of college aren't very good when they get into the NFL, regardless of how good they were in college. There's a learning curve to playing offensive line in the NFL, both in the verbiage and the terminology that you have to learn as a player, as well as relearning how to actually play football. Because offensive linemen, as somebody who played 7 years in the NFL, when I watched those college football games this weekend during the college football playoff, I saw a lot of terrible, and I mean I saw a lot of terrible offensive line play, and that's coming from LSU, that's coming from OU, that's coming from Clemson, that's coming from Ohio State. There may have been 1 or 2 offensive linemen out of all of those teams that I saw that looked like they had decent technique at best out there on the field, taking on defensive linemen. And, that's not a knock on them. That's not saying that they're not good players. That's not saying that they don't have talent. That's just saying from the eye of somebody who played a long time at the professional level, from the eye of somebody who learned from one of the best offensive line coaches in the NFL, and Andy Heck, who's also the offensive line coach in Kansas City, from knowing the kind of technique that it takes to handle certain kinds of pass rushers, the kind of technique it takes to handle certain kinds of run blocks. I can tell you from my perspective that as a lineman in college, these guys are going to be drafted more on their ability and the potential that they have rather than what they have necessarily shown to be their true football style and football technique, because all of that is going to get retaught when they make it to the next level. All of that is going to be retaught. They're going to be remolded into the kind of player that they should be, not the kind of player that you see right now from them as college players. So definitely thanks for that question there. But yeah, for me, I look at these guys and I say, these are just linemen out there just being bodies in front of bodies. Some guys have decent technique, but for the most part, a lot of things that are being done wrong. I watched a lot of the blitzes that were run against Ohio State by Clemson, and those are blitzes that we see on Sundays. Not going to lie, they are blitzes that we see on Sundays, but also looking at what they were doing in their blocking scheme of those blitzes, it was absolutely terrible. A lot of those blitzes should have been picked up. A lot of them should have been picked up. There was bad technique all over the place on the line, and that's not to be unexpected when you are looking at it from a professional standpoint. But again, like I said, there's talent that's mostly talent that's going to be molded into something that is a lot better than what you see in its current form. Let's take another look at these Reddit questions. And if you got any questions, guys, leave them in the chat box. I'll try and get to them as I can. But definitely, we are focusing on the NFL and what's happening in the with the playoff picture coming up, and what is going on also with a lot of the coaching decisions that are being made. But definitely leave your questions in the chat box, and I will get to those questions as quickly as I can. Now, taking a look here and going through one story that is, making its ways around the headlines is Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston is the first player to throw 30 interceptions and 30 touchdowns in a single season. And this is he's the first quarterback to throw 30 interceptions in a season since Buccaneers QB Vinny Testaverde back in 1988. That is a pretty telling stat. His situation is a precarious one. I'll be honest, because at the end of the day, I don't know. I just don't know. I can't tell you whether or not this guy is really worth spending $30 million a year on for a quarterback, especially based on what he's done. And it's pretty obvious to me that the Buccaneers have to decide. They're going to have to decide what they want to do with this guy, because, he's shown flashes of brilliance. There's no doubting it. The guy has shown flashes of brilliance in the course of his career, but the guy's also shown an extreme lack of consistency at the same time. So how do you decide what you're gonna do with a player like that? How do you decide whether or not he is worth paying $30 million a year? He's a free agent. His rookie contract is now expired, and the Bucs are going to have to decide what they want to do with this guy. It's a tough situation to be in if you're the Buccaneers front office management. Personally, I think maybe you franchise tag him 1 year and tell him, hey, if you give us 20% better than what you gave us last season, then we'll gladly give you some more money. But right now, with 30 interceptions, we just can't give you $30 million. That means you're making $1 million per interception. And, at the end of the day, I don't want my head to be on the platter when you come in next season with a, 7-year, $160 million contract, and you end up throwing 35 interceptions and 22 touchdowns. And, now I'm looking like the jerk who signed an unworthy quarterback to a long-term deal. You don't want to be that guy in Tampa Bay who has to make that decision. I don't envy that position that they're in, but the guy has shown that he has some talent, that he really does have top-level talent. He just does not have top-level consistency, and that is such a key word in the NFL, consistency. It's about being able to repeat those performances day in and day out. And for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they have given this guy 4 or 5 years, to prove that he has the ability to be that franchise quarterback. And he just, it's like he hasn't shown it, but then there's parts of him that has shown it. So which one do you take? Which one do you believe will take precedence over the other? He's one of the most frustrating quarterbacks in the NFL, because you look at some of the things he does and you say, wow, this guy's got it. He's got the ability to do it. He's doing it. These guys are winning games in Tampa. And then as soon as you finish that sentence, pick six. And that's exactly what happened to Tampa Bay yesterday in their season finale in overtime against the Falcons. This guy, first play of overtime. I mean, come on. First play of overtime, this guy throws a pick six, and it was a bad one, guys. It was a bad one. Let's pull it up. I'm going to pull that clip up because, man, you got to see how bad this interception was. I mean, holy moly. Holy moly. It was a bad one. It was a bad one. This guy, let's see here. I don't even know how to spell his damn name. Jameis. Oh, it really is Jameis. Jameis. Okay. I mean, when you look up Jameis Winston's name on Google, the third thing that comes up is Jameis Winston interceptions. And that should tell you all you need to know. Let's see here. Let's pull this thing up real quick. As soon as I pull it up, I'm going to share it with you guys, because this was just unbelievable. How do you do? Oh, here we go. I think this is it. Oh, no, I don't think that's it. That's not it. But somebody made a good point here on Jameis Winston. Just when I thought you couldn't get any dumber, you go and do something like this and totally redeem yourself. And then right after that, you do something even dumber. I mean, woo! The guy, it's an unfortunate situation. Not going to lie. It's an unfortunate situation for him. I'm trying to pull up this last interception that he threw. I just saw it the other day, but I'm trying to see if they got it here. Let's see. I mean, it was it was ugly, guys, and I really want to pull this thing up for you. But yeah, so this guy, first play out of into overtime, first thing he does is throw a ball to a clearly not open tight end / receiver, and it gets walked in for the touchdown. Oh, come on. They're showing the touchdowns. Show me the interceptions. Okay, let's do this. All right, let's see here. Okay, here we go. Got it right here. 1.9 million views. Let me share it with the screen. Share the screen with you guys real quick. And I think you guys are going to have a nice one on this one. Woo. Throws it to Deion Jones instead of throwing it to his tight end or receiver out there on the right, on the top of the screen here. Let's take a look at it. His last pass is a Buccaneer. Thank you. And we'll see you later. Game over. We just started OT. 7 seconds in, and you just toss the ball right to somebody who, I mean, clearly he's not open. This guy, Deion Jones, breaks on this ball with a quickness. I mean, why? Why? Why would you throw that there? That's just not going to work. Game over. I mean, come on. And it's funny. I just love to look at the I love to look at the replies to this because it's the best when you see these replies. People come up. Look at this. Jameis Winston, when he throws a pick, I'll fucking do it again. I'll do it again. This guy, I mean, this guy's had a rough one. 30 for 30. Jameis Winston, 30 for 30. I think that says it all right there. I mean, this guy has been a little bit, and this is the duplicity of Jameis Winston, guys. This is the duplicity that you deal with when you have a guy like Jameis Winston at quarterback. Are you going to sink the ship for your team this game or not? I mean, and of course we all know how brutal Twitter is going to be. How brutal Twitter is going to be when it comes to these kind of situations. And in all seriousness, I mean, this guy is out there playing. He's done a lot to improve himself as a person. He's done a lot to improve his game. The results of that are mixed, obviously, but he has tried to take steps to improve himself. 5,000 yards passing in a season. How unbelievable is that? The guy threw for 5,000 yards, and this is what he decides he's going to end his season on. And, at the end of the day, look, you can't put a total win or a total loss on one player. But in a situation like this, where you as the quarterback on the first play of overtime, you got to be thinking to yourself, let's not do anything stupid. Let's not take any unnecessary risks. But again, this is just really, this has kind of been par for the course for Jameis Winston. He has a lot of great ability. He has a great arm. The guy got a rocket. He could launch that thing anywhere. But, he has these brain farts just like this. He has these brain farts that end up costing these guys the game. And, what kind of taste do you have in your mouth after you lose this game with an opportunity to finish the season at 500? At 500. And, you're just unable to really, close the season out on a high note. I mean, he would have had a much, much more firm footing to demand $30 million a year had he led his team down the field and scored a touchdown to end this game, give the Bucs fans a win at the end of the season, basically having a season that you single-handedly turned around from the quarterback position and getting this team back to 8-8 and, finishing the season at 500, which, hey, by all accounts, that is a success based on where you guys have been. This is devastating for his chances at banking in next season. And there is a chance that they end up letting this guy go and they just let him go into free agency and see what he can find. Now, I'm not saying that he won't be able to land as a starter somewhere. I actually think he could land in a few places as a starter. I mean, you look at the situation that they have out there in Chicago. And maybe maybe that's a better fit for him. Maybe it's a better fit to have him out there in Chicago. Maybe it's a better fit to have him out in maybe give him a shot in Los Angeles. Since we may have witnessed Phillip Rivers in his last game. But I got to think to myself also that if you're a Los Angeles Chargers fan, if you're a Chargers fan in general, I'm taking Phillip Rivers every single day of the week over Jameis Winston. I don't care how many yards he's thrown for, how many touchdowns he's thrown. You're not going to get a 30 interception season out of Phillip Rivers. We all know that, fair and square. So definitely a situation that's going to be a very complicated one for Jameis Winston going into his offseason. But again, this is the single image that will continue to run through teams' minds when they're looking at this guy trying to decide whether or not they want to bring him in, is that he threw 30 touchdowns, but he also threw 30 interceptions, and that's never good for a guy who's trying to get 30 plus million paid to him per season in the NFL. Never something that you want to have on your resume when you're sitting at that desk looking to get paid the big boy money. The big boy money, you need to have a stout resume to put up there. And I just don't think that's what we're viewing right now from a situation with Jameis Winston. Just not something that I really see happen. So we'll see how that plays out. We'll see how that plays out in the offseason. But like I said before, we have now the NFL wildcard weekend back in play. The wildcard weekend is on its way here. It's going to be a lot of build up to this. A lot of fans that are going to be ready to go. And we got a question here from Sneaker Pikachu. Quicker release, Winston or Leftwich? My God, Winston. Now, I'm going to be quick. Oh, no way. No way is it Byron Leftwich. Look, I played with Byron Leftwich my rookie year. He ended up getting released before the season started. That's when they handed the keys to David Garrard. But listen, this guy's release was about a second long. He had the longest release I've ever seen a quarterback have. We played in Green Bay my rookie year during the preseason, third preseason game of the year. And, I was getting my first start with the first team offense. And Byron Leftwich was the quarterback. And got to say, for the entire first half that I'm blocking for this guy, it took him so long to throw the ball, and his release was so elongated when he did throw the ball. I was blocking my man and had enough time while I was blocking my man to turn my head to look and see if he was throwing the ball yet. And his arm was still in the air. His arm was still in the air, winding that release. Byron Leftwich had one of the slowest releases I'd ever seen. And yes, Sneaker Pikachu, it was the release of a rotary dial phone, because that is the circle that he made when he threw the ball. So I stood there holding a guy up while I was blocking and turning and looking to this guy and saying, wow. In my head, I'm just thinking to myself, wow, it takes him a very long time to throw the ball, which is one of the reasons why he was one of the most hit quarterbacks in the NFL in his time during his career, Byron Leftwich. So, yes, sir. Maybe you did just realize who I am, Anomaly Musics. But, yeah, Byron Leftwich's release was far slower than Jameis Winston. Jameis Winston does have a little bit of a baseball windup, but the guy gets the ball out, fairly quick. He gets it out at a fairly reasonable speed. So, not really not a comparison there in terms of who releases the ball faster, in my opinion. But we got a few minutes left here in the podcast, so I'll be taking any more questions that you guys have as we wrap this thing up. But again, I think it's going to be a great playoff season. I think these are going to be very close games to start the playoff season. And I feel like at the end of the day, a few, the teams that we kind of expect to make it, being Baltimore and probably for a lot of people being the 49ers. I really feel like that is going to be our matchup in the Super Bowl at the end of the day, which I feel like is a great matchup. It's also a rematch of the Super Bowl from back in 2015, or 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Baltimore and San Fran. So we'll see how it plays out. That's what I got my money on, is that we'll see those two teams play it out. And appreciate that, Duval from Anomaly Music. But our Jaguars got a long way to go, my friend. Our Jaguars are in the crapper, and that is never a good thing. And I definitely hope that we can figure a way to right that ship out in Duval. I bleed teal and gold. I love the Jaguars. I spent my entire career in Jacksonville. But 2012, I'm sorry, that Super Bowl between the Ravens and the Niners was 2012. That shows you how long I've been retired. I have no damn idea. But, just hoping that, this is the thing about the NFL. A lot of teams, you remember how a lot of teams don't do well, but every team has their time in the sun. And the Jaguars had their time in the sun back in 2007, which was my rookie year. 10 years later, we have our time in the sun again in 2017 with the AFC Championship appearance. And, you just hope that we can shorten the window on those times in the sun as we move forward. But you never know. Each and every year, anything can happen in the NFL. It is one of those sports where any team can win on any given Sunday. So you can never necessarily count your team out, because all it takes is one spark and your team can get things righted and be on the move with the arrow pointed up in a hurry. Got a question here from Stoned R2D2. Good to see you, Uche. What's your opinion on Casey Keenum? Casey Keenum. Well, I'll tell you what. In what respect are you asking that? In what respect are you asking that? Are you talking about his ability as a quarterback? Well, I mean, the guy right now, he doesn't really have much of a chance to be playing quarterback behind what's his name from the Redskins. Oh, what is that quarterback's name? He is playing behind I forget their quarterback's name. Anyways, he's a backup right now, and he'll likely be a backup for the foreseeable future. The Redskins have a lot to worry about, and he may not even, depending on what changes are made, you may not even see this guy on the roster next year. There's going to be a lot of turnover. That's what happens when you bring in a new head coach. That's what happens when you bring in a new Haskins. That's who I'm thinking about. Thank you, Ryan Kennel, RK Outpost, Sports Wars. Make sure you go and subscribe to Sports Wars. I do podcasts with those guys over there at Sports Wars as well. We are all part of the same unit, same community of commentators in the sports, online sports community. But yeah, Haskins Jr., quarterback right now for the Redskins. He has got that position pretty much locked down. I would think that they're going to try and build a team around him moving forward. But definitely Casey Keenum has probably going to, probably best for him to look for another spot to play next season and try and battle his way in there, see if he can get himself out there as a starter at some point. But right now, with the way that the Redskins are looking, with the reorganizing that they're going to have to do, I don't see that, a player like him is going to have the kind of longevity in Washington as maybe you hope he does. But we'll see. Now it says, let's see here. If I had to choose one, Animalic Music, if I had to choose one to go with, who am I keeping? DJ Chark, D.D. Westbrook, or Conley? Woo, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I'm going to keep DJ Chark. I think that guy has shown that he has the ability to get open. He has the ability the ability to be a threat down the field, and he catches the ball with his hands. The guy has been showing consistency all season long for the Jaguars. He's been one of the few bright spots. Matter of fact, all three of those receivers have actually had played fairly well this season. But again, the Jaguars are in a precarious situation. It's hard to. It's going to be a hard decision to decide whether or not to keep Doug Marrone. But I really think that Shad Khan is looking to kind of get a bit of a reload on that team, kind of a restart on that team. So I'm seeing that probably Doug Marrone is going to be gone. I think that, at the end of the day, they're going to need to draft another quarterback. May not be this coming season, but maybe in a few years. They're probably going to give Minshew a season to see what he can do. And it's just a tough situation because Nick Foles, at the end of the day, the guy played darn well, before the injury. And I don't think he was really given a fair shake after the injury at kind of reasserting himself. You give the guy 10 quarters of football after he comes off of a broken collarbone and 8 weeks off of the scene. And after 10 quarters, you decide that's enough. You're going to bench him. I mean, what a lapse in judgment that may seem to have been to give him the amount of money that they gave him. But at the same time, if you're giving a guy that amount of money, you need to give him a season to actually show you what he can do. The guy only got about 4 or 5 games into a 17-week season, and they decided that that's what they were going to judge him off of, and I can't really agree with that. I think that if there's going to be a quarterback controversy in Jacksonville, then it starts with him as the starter and Minshew as the competing backup looking to win the starting position. And I think that should be the way that they go into it next year. That should be the way that they should take that. That should be the direction that they take that quarterback position next season, because if you have a new head coach and you have a new offensive coordinator, you're going to have a new scheme. And, how much space do the Jaguars have in their cap going into next year? I think they're sitting at $1.5 million. Tom Coughlin destroyed their salary, destroyed their cap space. They don't have any flexibility whatsoever. So they're stuck with Nick Foles. They're going to have to make do. They're going to have to give this guy a honest to goodness shot at a healthy season, being able to play. And, at the end of the day, once that's done, you let the chips fall where they may. But I think just pulling them and yanking them after 10 quarters, not necessarily a fair thing to do. I can see why they did it. There's a lot of merchandise probably being sold with Gardner Minshew as the quarterback, and the crowd just seems to react better to Gardner Minshew. But at the same time, Minshew, still a young guy. We still got a lot to there's still a lot to evaluate with him moving forward, because like everyone knows, you have that breakout year, but it's usually the year after your breakout year is when you find out if you really have the same kind of player or not, because now you have defenses that are going to be able to game plan you over an off season, which makes all the difference for being able to stop a threat like Gardner Minshew. Now, Joel Pacheco here says, would you take Cam Newton? I would answer that with a resounding no. I would not take Cam Newton if I were the Jaguars. And, it's going to be very hard to find a place for Cam Newton outside of, places like Chicago. I think that's probably the best fit for him at the time is going to be Chicago. And, I'm just not so sure what kind of value a guy like Cam Newton is going to have if you're looking at his production over the last few seasons. Now, granted, a couple years back, he did have a really good season. And I know to start this season, he was actually, on pace to have, the best season of his career. But at the same time, the best season of his career compared to the standards, if you go back and watch my video on Cam Newton, on my YouTube channel. His statistics over the course of his career only add up to fairly average when compared to everything else out there in the NFL. So we'll see how it plays out, but I don't think that he's going to get paid the kind of money that he necessarily wants. But that's kind of what goes with the territory when when you kind of have a falling out of grace with the Panthers as he had. He's gonna have to go somewhere now and prove that he can put together a great season and show us that he is able to return to form, much in the way that we saw him back in 2015. So that's something that is yet to be seen, but we'll keep an eye on that. We'll keep an eye on that. So appreciate all you guys being on this Lineman Life podcast. That is going to do it for us here with the Lineman Life podcast. Appreciate you guys for coming out, showing your support. I will be on again this Thursday, same time, 12:15 p.m., and I am looking to have a special guest, LaRon McClain, former fullback for the Baltimore Ravens, on the podcast with me. We will be talking about the Baltimore Ravens and their quest for the Super Bowl. This guy played 7 years with the Ravens, was one of the last, if not the last, true fullback in the NFL, who was also a running threat as well. A glorified offensive lineman, if you will. But this guy is definitely somebody who I have developed a great relationship with over the course of the last 6 to 8 months. And I'm looking forward to having him on the show. So look out for that. Make sure you hit the like button. Make sure you subscribe to the Observant Lineman, Uche Nwaneri. I appreciate you guys very much for being here on the Lineman Life podcast. And we will catch you on the next one. Peace.